just out here watching boxes. And before I make any kind of statement or anything, I'd like to get in the suntan, getting some vitamin D.
So you're getting vitamin D or you're watching the drop boxes?
Both, yeah.
Has anyone responded to you driving through? Has anyone said anything?
Before I say any more, I need to call somebody.
Okay.
So,
who are you going to call?
give me just a minute.
Okay. What organization are you with?
It's Clean Elections USA.
Clean Elections USA. Okay.
Vigilantes have taken to voter intimidation in the great state of Arizona, and the gentleman who just refused to answer any questions in the interview you just watched is definitely part of Clean Elections USA, the group that's spearheading this effort to essentially show up at drop boxes and I'm gonna guess do more than just get vitamin D. Now, according to their website, Clean Elections USA is in fact recruiting people across the country to basically watch ballot drop boxes in an effort to detect fraud. Now, before I give you any more details, let's just say for now the billionth time that there has been absolutely no evidence indicating that there was widespread voter fraud in 2020. That there were any issues with widespread voter fraud even before 2020. The Trump administration, the Trump campaign in particular, had many opportunities to prove that there was widespread election fraud, and they failed to do so before the courts in as many as 60 cases. So with that said, let me tell you what this group is up to. Again, Clean Elections USA. We are looking for true patriots to take a stand and watch the drop boxes. We want to gather video and live witness evidence of any ballot tampering that takes place in real time, the site states. Now, they aren't just taking pictures. There's more to it than that, which by the way, I mean, isn't it great to live in a surveillance state at a time when you have one major political party putting all sorts of paranoid thoughts in the minds of voters, many of whom certainly love their guns. Now, earlier this week, Steve Bannon hosted a woman by the name of Melody Jennings on a podcast called Bannon's War Room, soon to be Bannon's prison cell. Now, Jennings is introduced as the founder of Clean Elections USA. Quote, "We are posting pictures up of these mules. People are getting the word. They are showing up. Our people are showing up and gathering around boxes and shutting this stuff down." Now, cases of voter intimidation are increasingly being reported in states like Arizona. Arizona officials, in fact, sounded alarms about voter safety after two armed men, also vigilantes, of course, dressed in tactical gear, were standing outside a Maricopa County ballot drop box just this past Friday evening. Officials were flagged by the complaint that read, quote, "Camo-clad people taking pictures while an early ballot was dropped off outside the Maricopa County election headquarters." Cenk,
yeah,
jump in.
So look, what you really need is a balancing act, right? And that's true of almost every issue, and it's certainly true in this issue. So now that I've said that we're gonna do a reasonable balancing of interests, obviously every right winger has already turned it off. No, I just want you to shout about mules. Right? So we'll get back to the mules in a second. But how would you do a normal balancing act here? Because you don't want to say that have a system where nobody verifies the vote and there's no one observing the vote and anybody can do what they want. I would hate that system, right? And you don't want to do a system where armed thugs come up to people with a gun and put a gun to their heads and go, "Who'd you vote for?" Right? Or what are you doing here? We can all agree that we don't want either one of those extremes, right? So we need to balance. So how would you balance? Well, for one of the things that you would do is you would have, for example, people from both parties be election observers. Now, right wing, you ready? I got great news for you. That system already exists.
Yeah,
That's
thank
the
you.
current system we're in.
Yeah,
okay?
Thank you. I was a little worried, Cenk. I'm like, why are you letting these lunatics frame the conversation as if there's a problem with election monitoring? And let me just note that on a federal level, the party that has consistently voted against any type of funding to bolster election security, Republican Party, Republican lawmakers always vote against that, always.
Of course, they don't actually ever want to do anything. They also vote against funding for mental health treatment right after they said, "Oh, it's not the guns, it's mental health." They just go the next day, they go and vote against it. because they're unbelievable liars. And the media never calls out the entire Republican Party for being liars. They just call it even. So they think they're just gonna let us lie, so we'll just do it. So in this case, are there election monitors? Yes, guys, there's already election monitors, okay? So now, I know that the Republicans agree with me that you can't have what's happening today, which is armed people showing up and monitoring in a vigilante way what's happening at the voting booths. Why? Why do I know that the Republicans would actually agree with me? Because it already happened. In 2008, just two Black Panthers wearing a black jacket and black berets showed up in Philadelphia, and one of them had a billy club. Okay, they launched a federal investigation. They're like, there's two people, the berets look paramilitary, right? And they flipped out. They're like, this is voter intimidation. How can white people vote if there are black people around, right? Now, they're sending like armed thugs all across Arizona and other states, and they're like, whoa, we're just monitoring elections, wink. Okay, and now look, not all of them are armed and not all of them are thugs. And I'm sure that a lot of them got brainwashed by right-wing propaganda. And here's another thing you need evidence. Like, so for example, a lot of people said, hey, Bernie had the primaries rigged against them in 2016 by the DNC. Well, you could prove that based on how many debates or how little debates, when they had the debates, what they did with the money, etc. But a lot of people said, no, the votes themselves were rigged, but they didn't have enough evidence for that. So we never said that because there just wasn't evidence for it. But on the right wing side, they're like, no, dude, a propagandist did a video about mules, and everybody knows mules cheat, okay? That's good enough evidence. No, you don't have any evidence because there isn't any evidence. So stop terrorizing people like lunatics.
No, but just really let the reality of this whole situation sink in, because you're referring to a man who put out a ridiculous, unfounded documentary regarding election fraud. None of the claims can be verified. And the individual who put that together was, that's right, convicted and served time in prison for breaking election campaign finance laws. So, not really a trustworthy individual, but it doesn't matter, because if the conservative media bolsters that documentary, what was it, like 2,000 Mules or something like that? I forget the title of it, yeah. As long as the right-wing media bolsters it and lends credibility to it, then some portion of the Republican electorate will fall for it. And so, look, I think these people who are showing up at the ballot drop boxes genuinely believe that they're fulfilling a patriotic duty in protecting election security. Now, of course, it ends up being like intimidation, and people feel uncomfortable going to those drop boxes and dropping off those ballots, but they are being incited in many ways by both right-wing politicians and the right-wing media.
Yeah, no, of course. Unfortunately, the source of almost all the problems in America is the media. It's unfortunate in a lot of ways. It's actually supposed to hold the government accountable. It's supposed to hold the powerful accountable. We're in media. We don't want media to be the number one problem, but unfortunately it is. And in this case, it's right-wing media that just gives you one lie after another after another. And mainstream media is perfectly happy to play along with these nonsense games that they have, and they never clarify what the reality is. And so look, if you want voter verification, I'm ready to sign that bill in 1,000 different ways. If you say verifying the vote is making sure black people don't vote, no, I don't agree to that. I don't agree to that. And if you say, oh no, I don't want to do vote by mail because that hurts Republican chances of winning. No, that's not a thing. I don't agree to that. But if you say, here's what we should do to make sure that our votes are the actual votes, I love it, and I'm happy to sign on to that bill. But funny enough, no Republican has ever introduced that bill.
Right. And and I just want to emphasize, it is intimidating, especially like there's one voter in Phoenix who says that his wife was being photographed and her license plate on her vehicle was being photographed after she had dropped off her ballot at a ballot box. That is super intimidating, especially for a woman, right? Having a bunch of dudes like taking pictures of her and taking pictures of her car. And so it has a negative effect on our democracy. It is not a good thing at all. And I don't want that intimidation happening. It doesn't happen from the left wing at all, if ever. And with the right wing, it seems to be their regular stunt. It keeps coming back up. This isn't a new story. It just keeps happening over and over and over again.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.